Hi, I'm John Felt. Now last week I said that it looked like a pretty quiet week, and indeed it was. Very little rain fell over the southeast U.S., and in fact, many areas received no rain at all. This week looks like a transition week as we go from one pattern into another. At the start of the week with that transition, it looks like we'll get quite a bit of rain. Then it looks like we're going to go into a quiet pattern that'll last well into September, if not into early October. There's been some activity in the tropics, but it certainly hasn't reached either the Atlantic or the Gulf coasts. Stay tuned to this week's edition of the Weekly Water Outlook. Well, I mentioned that last week would be pretty quiet across the region, and this is the actual rainfall that fell last week. And if you look across the southeast U.S., you can see very little rain fell in many areas. The majority of the southeast U.S. received virtually no rainfall. This shows up in the percent of normal rainfall. The reds are only 25% or less, as dark red is 5% or less. So it was indeed a very dry week across the southeast U.S. Now, if you look at the area up in the higher elevations of the Appalachians, just to the east of that, there was a little bit of convection, and there's a hit or miss convection or rainfall in Florida as well. Some areas of blue, few received above normal, but overall, by far, it was a very dry week across the southeast U.S. Now here's the drought monitor, the latest drought monitor, and I want to make a point here. I gave a briefing to the ACF governing board this past week, and if you look at this core of drought, it's been eroded over the last year over to the areas to the west, a bit to the north, definitely to the southeast due to some tropical activity. And this is really the scale of this core of drought now is so small, I really can't say that there's a reason for that either from a weather type scale, certainly not a mesoscale, and definitely not a climate scale. So it's somewhat of an anomaly that it's sitting out here where other areas have been reduced. Now, if you look at the Midwest, you can't really see the area here. Very widespread, so you can see that that's perhaps a climate type pattern. But I think what we have now in the southeast U.S. is a lingering drought where things have been changing a little bit for the benefit with soil moisture and such, stream flow. But this core of drought persists, and I really can't explain that either from weather or overall climate patterns. Okay, if we take a look at the tropics, every year is always quite interesting with tropical activity where systems will go. So when we look at soil moisture recharge and the possibility of an inland moving system, not only do we have to look at if a system's developed, but where they're moving. And this year we've had steady development of systems. They just have not been affecting our area. So this is the latest positions of any tropical activity. Nadine is the only system out there that's named right now. We have an area of disturbed tropical weather in the Caribbean, but that right now has a low probability of development. So right at this moment, which keep in mind, this is the peak of tropical season, it's pretty quiet. So even if other activity would develop, where would it move? And that's very important from a water resource standpoint. And we've had the steering flow throughout most of the season has been not conducive to move inland, especially over the mid-Atlantic or anywhere along the Atlantic coast. Right now we have a blocking type pattern aloft. We have this jet stream here, and so anything that comes in here is going to be picked up by this upper trough and lifted up to the northeast. We have an area of high pressure that's been sitting out there most of the tropical season, and that's where Nadine is going to be moving right now, is along that system and curving up towards the northeast, or actually moving up to the northeast. Now there is that possibility of a system would develop very far south that it could take what Isaac took, perhaps get in the Gulf, but right now I see no signs of that happening, either a system developing in that region and moving in there. We'll keep an eye on it. It is the peak of tropical season, but right now, either from a development standpoint or a steering standpoint, I really don't see anything that's going to impact the southeast U.S. and change water resources one way or the other. Okay, so let's look at the big picture, and this is what I call a transition week. I'm going to try to point out the transitions from one to another when they become significant. September is usually a pretty quiet month, and this is actually a fairly strong transition that we're getting in for this time of year. The jet stream is forecast to dip very far south over the eastern part of the United States. Where that area of low pressure is, we expect it to be much cooler. And then in response to that digging trough in the east, we'd have a ridging of high pressure in the west. And with that high pressure ridging, that's going to cut off precipitation as well. both of these patterns are not conducive for significant rainfall once they set up. Now keep in mind that we're going to go through this transition early this week, and during that transition, Sunday, Monday, perhaps into early Tuesday over parts of the mid-Atlantic, we are going to have significant rainfall. But once this gets into place, rainfall should be reduced. Now there are a lot of lines here. This is the 6 to 10 day jet stream position, and I just put that in here to point out a few things. First of all, look how far south this jet dips over the 6 to 10 day period. We're getting out well into September at this time, and these blue dashed lines are departures from normal on pressure. So blue would say it's much below normal. So that's going to be the prevailing trend that we're transitioning in, is to this much cooler type pattern and relatively stable pattern as far as rainfall goes. Out in the west, it's going to continue to be dry with that ridge of high pressure. With few exceptions, both these patterns are pretty dry. And over the southeast U.S., once we go through the transition, it looks like it's going to stay pretty dry. Now here's the transition. We have a cold front that will be pushing through early this week. Moisture is pretty significant ahead of it, atmospheric moisture, and that will result in some precipitation. Right now it's hard to say where it's going to occur, but right now it looks like the heaviest amounts will be northern Alabama, northern Georgia, parts of Tennessee, and then up towards the northeast across western parts of the Carolinas and Virginia. Precipitation could also be enhanced over the higher elevations. I want to point out there could be a flash flood threat in that region, even if it's fairly dry. So this is what is going to occur with the transition, with the cold front passing through. Behind it, it'll be much drier. This is something in my blog I will be talking about over the next day or so, the smaller scale features, mesoscale features that are driving the precipitation over the early part of this week. As far as an outlook goes for precipitation, I have for the rest of the month into early October, I think there's pretty good confidence in this. And this is the first period from the 16th through the 24th this week, and you can see that we have above normal precipitation, or at least significant precipitation over the area, and that's reflective in this system, this transition, this front going through. But once that goes through, from the middle of this week all the way through the rest of the month, it looks very dry over the southeast U.S. It looks like very little rain. So really, most of the area could use some rain. Some of the area desperately needs rain. And it looks like we have this one-shot period of rain early this week, and after that it looks like we're going into a fairly prolonged period of little or maybe even no rainfall. That's going to be the main trend as we get towards the middle through the end of the month of September. So this is your takeaway from the weekly water outlook. This will be a transition week early this week. A cold front passage will be going through early this week, bringing a good chance of rainfall. Many areas could receive anywhere from a ½ inch to over an inch or two. Highest chances for rain will be in northern parts of Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, and then the western parts of the Carolinas. Once that occurs, the upper jet stream will dig south. That's going to be bringing in a prolonged period of below normal precipitation that'll last through the rest of the month. And finally, right in the middle of tropical season, right now I see no tropical activity expected to reach the U.S. at least over the next week, possibly 2 weeks. Thank you for listening to the weekly water outlook. Keep posted to my blog posts throughout the week, and I will be updating the next weekly water outlook next Sunday or early Monday. Thank you.